Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer and publisher behind Meliorvia. I am up here at Immortals Inc. with Mikey.
What is up, John? What a marvelous afternoon we have here today.
Yeah, it's a great one. Running out of summer, but can't complain much.
It is. Speaking
of
nice
summer.
One.
And speaking of summer is when kids are out on bikes.
Usually, right?
Yeah.
I tried in winter one time. It wasn't really a good idea.
Especially in Cleveland. Yeah.
Especially in Cleveland.
So we're going to talk about the Kids on Bikes RPG today. This is from Jonathan Gilmore and Doug Lewandowski, and I hope I didn't mangle your name too much. I also want to mention the artist is Heather Vaughn. She did the cover and the interior art. I believe she's the only credited artist on this.
Wow, so she did all the art.
Yeah, did a ton of work on this. So this was funded through Kickstarter originally back in 2017. Honestly, this is an unlicensed Stranger Things RPG, which thus the Kids on Bikes. It is very much a game about playing kids getting in trouble in the 1980s, usually with some kind of paranormal elements mixed in. There are two big expansions for it, Teens in Space and Kids on Brooms. Kids on Brooms is very much an unlicensed Harry Potter RPG.
Okay.
And Teens in Space, I'm not 100% on which specific source material they drew on for that, but teenagers getting in trouble in space. Right?
Unlicensed Guardians of the Galaxy or something
Could be.
That.
The game starts off with world building, which really makes a lot of sense since you are trying to set it in a small town somewhere in the middle of the US. It's going to be a small town. It's going to be in an era before everybody had a camera in their pack all the time, right? No smartphones. That small town isn't just the game master coming up with it. The game system is set up so it's a collaborative creation between the players and the DM talking about places. And then there's also a discussion at that same time about any kind of issues that people might not want to have present in the game, whether they're trigger issues or just things they're not comfortable talking about. It's worth laying those things out at the very, very start of the campaign. And the game does a good job of addressing that in a diplomatic way.
It's definitely good to normalize that.
Absolutely. Once you get through that world building element, then you get into character creation. They use kind of playbooky like elements, but they're very different from the Powered by the Apocalypse game system. And there is a PDF of those that you can just hop on the web and download. It's even linked inside the book. And briefly covers that in the appendix as well. Each of those archetypical characters does have some tropes, and those are starting points for setting up your characters, but they're not required. Character stats are dice-based. You have 6 stats, and one of each of those is assigned to a die type using a D4 up through a D20. And there's a specific section that I thought was really well handled on disabled and neuroatypical PCs, as well as discussing diversity. Again, getting back into that whole normalizing things. I do think they did a great job of addressing that in a really effective way. And then character interaction is set up with a Q&A system where everybody sits around and talks about how their different characters are linked to other player characters at the table. There is a section where they talk about having child characters, teen characters, and adult characters. Genre purposes, I'm not wild about mixing in adult characters, but that may just be me. Other people may say, no, I don't want to play a kid. I don't want to play a teen. But I think that's, if you want to capture the feel, I'd rather just have the adults be NPCs. Personal preference.
It's like we're kids. We have an older 26-year-old friend.
Yeah,
it's my homie.
That
Don't
gets
worry
a little
about
creepy sometimes, at least to me. Game mechanics on this are very straightforward. It's roll a stat, aim high, dice can explode. So if you roll the max value on a die, you roll again and add to it. So that way your D4 can become, a not embarrassing total. Any combat is very potentially lethal. So combat in this game is designed to be very, very significant. You really want to work hard to avoid it when you're playing this. Beyond that, the game rules are what I would consider rules light. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of heavy lifting there for most groups. Not everybody's going to agree with that. That is a subjective call.
What do you mean by the combat is tricky? Like you just want to stay away from sticky scenarios all the time because you'll get destroyed?
I mean that anytime you get in a fight with somebody, a character could die. And I don't just mean like a gunfight. I mean like, a lucky punch can kill somebody. Okay. So it's a big deal if you're attached to your characters, and most people are.
I just want peace.
Yeah, you're going to want to try to avoid situations that put them in danger because any kind of combat situation carries a very real risk with it, just based on the way the dice are set up. There is one character in the group, as they've set this up, who has a special power. And that character is kind of run by everybody by default. The way they set things up is that's not going to be one person's PC. Everybody's going to have some level of control through that. And that character has aspects that are divided out amongst the other players. And when those aspects come into play is going to indicate when a different player has control of that character. So getting back to Stranger Things, this is, a tie-in to 11. So that rather than one person playing 11, different characters in the group could influence her actions throughout the campaign. I thought it was an interesting way of doing it, and it does kind of make that character feel a little more alien, a little more foreign to the other characters since no player is directly controlling them. I'm not positive it's the way I would want to do it, but I think it's a neat system, and I think it's a neat way of making that character feel different from the others. Once we get past that, there's a GM section, has some advice on managing the table, keeping the players engaged, trying to keep things on track, but also, being open to the adventure going into directions you didn't expect. And then some material on setting and story crafting. So how you might want to set up different elements to drive the narrative forward. And again, keeping players engaged and using the things that the players and their characters seem to be drawn to further develop the narrative. Past that, there are a number of appendices. Those cover things like the relationship questions that I mentioned earlier for how you might tie different characters together, a system of strengths and flaws, because every character is going to have those. That's kind of built into those archetypical starting points. Powered character aspects, those elements of the different character, of the powered character that give each of the different players an opportunity to control them. And then the tropes that I mentioned can kind of drive character development. And then finally, there's a list of difficulty ratings and the consequences for things that might happen when characters don't exactly have their actions go in the direction that they were expecting them to. We do have copies of this as well as both expansions up here on the shelf at Immortals Inc. It is $25. It's 80 pages in full color, and it is published by Hunters Entertainment, and Renegade Games, who we've mentioned before, is currently the company that's handling the publishing and distribution, I think, of it. So Hunters managed to get on board with a much larger publisher to get that out there more quickly.
Nice. Kids on bikes, kids in space. Was it kids in space or was it
teens in space?
Teens in space.
Kids on bikes and kids on brooms.
Kids on brooms.
So if any of those sound interesting to you, stop up at Immortals Inc. We got them on the shelf, or hit immortalsinc.com. Till next time, folks, good gaming.
See you guys later.